Even when I have a clear signal to reinforce my position, I find it extremely difficult. I have sustained period of constant success, usually followed by some failures drawdowns. I started trading. I will describe my trading enthusiasm as effort that meaning some looks in between a lot of pain. I have some feeling that the market are always me personally. I will not be able to lead to back and be able to put passing some wound behind me. I have a money management philosophy that is founded in the principle of always taking some money out of the market when the market makes it available. Money management philosophy that founded principle of always taking some money out of the market when the market makes it available. It's supposed to identify patterns in the market which that represent an opportunity and then determine the risks of finding out of this pattern will present as out as they have in the past. There are patterns in the market behavior that represent an opportunity and then to determine the risks of finding out of these patterns will present out as they have been in the past. Sometimes I just can hate feeling that I am a victim of the market. On a trade, I usually try to stay focused on one time frame. Trading is very costly, willing to fix it far beyond the scope of most people. There are times when I can really feel the flow of market, however, I find difficulty acting on these feelings. Many times when I am able to move the risk over, but I still don't take my focus. But how much money I am making today, I am ready ever second feel that I could have been more. When I put into it, I feel I have pushed, but instead all my money I can make from the trading position. The most important component in a trader's ability to accumulate money over time is having a belief in his own consistency. I agree. If you were country wish to be able to instantly acquire one trading spot will be. After especially business worrying about the market, do you ever feel compelled to make a trade between you are afraid that you might miss out? Do you ever feel compelled to make a trade because you are afraid that you might miss out? And it doesn't happen, we don't have a like trades to be perfect. I when I make a profit, it feels so good that it makes a profit. Do you ever find yourself planning trades you never execute and execute trades you never planned? Most traders trying to make money but aren't able to keep what they made. Tendency. Sensitive to this book. The road to success, fundamental technical analysis. In the beginning, fundamental analysis. The road to success, fundamental technical analysis. In the beginning, fundamental analysis. Who remembers when fundamental analysis was considered the only real or proper way to make trading decision? When I started trading in 1978, technical analysis was used by only a handful of traders who were considered by the rest of the market community to be at the very least crazy. As difficult as it is to believe now, it wasn't very long ago when Wall Street and most of the major financial institutions thought that technical analysis was some sort of mystical hocus pocus. Now, of course, that's the opposite true. Almost all explanations are some form of technical analysis to help them formulate the trading strategies. Except for some small isolated pockets in the academic community, the purely fundamental analyst is virtually extinct. What caused this dramatic shift in perspective? I'm sure it's no surprise to anyone that the answer to this question is very simple. Money. The problem with making trading decision from a strictly fundamental perspective is the inherent difficulty of making money constantly using this approach. For those who may not be familiar with fundamental analysis, let's make fundamental analysis attempt to make take into consideration all the variables that could affect the relative balance or imbalance between supply of and possible demand of any particular stock, commodity, or financial instrument. Using primarily a factor model that with the significance of a variety of factors, interest rate, balance sheet, weather pattern, and numerous other, the analyst posed what the price will be at some point in the future. Fundamental analysis. Fundamental analysis aims to take into consideration all the variables that could affect the relative balance or imbalance between the supply of and possible demand of any particular stock, commodity, or financial instrument. The significant variety of factors, interest rate, balance sheet, weather pattern, numerous others, the analyst project what the price will be at some point in the future. The problem with this model is that they rarely, if ever, factor in some other traders as variable. If ever factor in other traders as variable, people expressing the belief and expectation about the future make prices move, not models. The fact that a model makes a logical and reasonable projection based on all the irrelevant variable is not much value if the traders who are all responsible for most of the trading volume are not aware of the model or don't believe in it. As a matter of fact, many traders, especially those on the floor of the future exchange, who have the ability to move price very dramatically in one direction or the other, you don't have the slightest concept of the fundamental supply and demand factor that are supposed to affect price. Furthermore, at any given moment, much of the trading activity is prompted by a response to emotional factors that are completely outside the parameters of the fundamental model. In other words, the people who trade and constantly move prices don't always act in a rational manner. Fundamental analysts could find that a prediction about where prices will be at some point in the future is correct, but in the meantime, price movement could be so volatile that it will be very difficult, if not impossible, to stay in a trade in order to realize the objective. Organ mark in the form of exchange, but the trading community accepted technology as a viable tool for making money until the late 1970s or early 1980s. Other technologies knew that it took the mainstream market communities embracing to catch on to it. A finite number of traders participate in the market on any given day. We care most many of these traders do the same kind of things over and over in their attempt to make money. In other words, individual develop behavior pattern and a group of individuals interacting with one another on a constant basis from form collective behavior pattern. These behavior patterns are observable and quantifiable, and they repeat themselves with statistical reliability. Technical analysis is the method that organizes this collective behavior into identifiable patterns that can give a clear indication of when there is a great probability of one thing happening over another. In a sense, technical and allows to get in the mind of the market and see what's like to happen, especially in the grand pattern of the market generation for this moment. Attempts to take into consideration all the variables that could affect the relative balance or imbalance between the supply and consumer demand of any particular stock. Uh, Interest rate balance sheet. weather patterns, and numerous other. And they organize the call to be as a method of projecting future price movement. Technical analysis that turn out to be far superior to be purely fundamental approach. It keeps the trader focus on what the market is doing now in relation to what it has done in the past instead of focusing on what the market should be doing based solely on what logical and reasonable as determined by the Maxwell model. The models. Fundamental. On the other hand, fundamental actors what I call reality gap between what should be and what is. The reality gap is difficult to make anything but very long-term prediction that can be difficult to exploit even if they are correct. In contrast, technical analysis not only chooses this reality gap but also makes it to the trader a virtually unlimited number of possibilities to take advantage of. The technical approach opens up many more possibilities because it identifies how the same repeatable behavior pattern occurs in every time frame. Moment to moment, daily, weekly, yearly, and every time span in between. In other words, technical analysis turns the market into an endless stream of opportunity to invest yourself. The shift to mental analysis. If technical analysis works so well, why would more and more of the trading community shift their focus from technical analysis of the market to mental analysis of themselves, meaning their own individual trading psychology? To answer this question, you probably don't have to do anything more than ask yourself why you bought this book. The most powerful reason is that you are dissatisfied with the difference between what you perceive as the unlimited potential to make money and what you end up with on the bottom line. That's the problem with technical analysis, if you want to call it a problem. Once you learn to identify patterns and read the market, you find there are limited opportunities to make money. But as if I am sure you already know, there can also be a gap between what you understand about the market and your ability to uh, and the ability to transform your knowledge into constant profit or steadily rising equity curve. Think about the number of times you look at the price chart and say to yourself, it looks like the market is going up. And what you thought was going to happen actually happened, but you did nothing except watch the market move while you anguished over all the money you could have made. There is a difference between predicting and something will happen in the market and thinking about the money you could have made and the reality of actually getting into an out of trades. I call the difference and other like it a psychological gap that can make trading one of the most difficult endeavors you could choose to undertake and certainly one of the most mysterious to master. The big question is, can trading be mastered? Is it possible to experience trading with the same ease and simplicity applied when you are only watching the market and thinking about success as opposed to actually having to put on and take off trades? Not only is the answer an unequivocal yes, but that's also exactly what this book is designed to give you. The insight and understanding you need about yourself and about the nature of trading. So the result is that actual doing becomes as easy, simple, and stress-free as when you are just watching the market and thinking just about doing it. This may seem like a tall order, and to some of you, it may even seem impossible, but it's not. There are people who have mastered the art of trading, who have closed the gap between the possibilities available and the bottom line performance. But as you might expect, these winners are relatively few in number compared with the number of traders who experience varying degree of frustration, all the way to extreme exasperation, wondering why they can't create the constant success they so desperately desire. In fact, the difference between those two groups of traders, the constant winners and everyone else, are analogous to the difference between the Earth and the Moon. The Earth and Moon are both celestial bodies that exist in the same solar system, so they do have something in common, but they are as different in nature and characteristics as night and day. By the same token, anyone who puts on trade can claim to be a trader, but when you compare the characteristics of the handful of constant winners with the characteristics of most of the traders, you will find they are also as different as night and day. If going to the moon represents constant success as trader, we can say that getting to the moon is possible. The journey is extremely difficult and only a handful of people have made it. From our perspective, the moon is usually visible every night and it seems to so close that we could just reach out and touch it. Trading successfully means feel the same way. On any given day, week or month, the market make available vast amount of money to anyone who has the capacity to put on a trade. Since the market are in constant motion, this money is also constantly flowing, which makes the possibilities for success greatly magnified and seemingly within your grasp. I use the word seemingly to make an important distinction between the two groups of traders. For those who have learned how to be constant or have broken through what I call the threshold of consistency, the one is not only within their grasp, they can virtually take it at will. I am sure that some will find this statement shocking or difficult to believe, but it is true. There are some limitations, but for the most part, money flows into the account of those traders with such ease and effortlessness that it literally boggles most people's minds. However, for the traders who have not evolved into this later group, the group seemingly means exactly what it implies. It seems as if the consistency or ultimate success they desire is at hand or within their grasp just before it slips away or evaporates before their eyes time and time again. The only thing about trading that is constant with this group is emotional pain. Yet, yes, they certainly have moment of elation, but it's an exaggeration to say that most of the time they are in a state of fear, anger, frustration, anxiety, disappointment, betrayal, and regret. So what separates this group of traders? Is it intelligence? Are the constant winners just plain smarter than everyone else? Do they work harder? Are they better analysts? Or do they have access to better trading system? Do they possess inherent personality characteristics and make it easier for them to deal with the intense pressure of trading? All of these possibilities sound quite plausible, except when you consider that most of the trading industry failures are also some of the biggest society brightest and most accomplished people. The largest group of constant losers is composed primarily of doctors, lawyers, engineers, scientists, CEOs, wealthy retirees, and entrepreneurs. Furthermore, most of the industry-based market analysts are the worst traders imaginable. Intelligence and good market analysis can certainly contribute to success, but they are not the defining factors that separate the constant winner from everyone else. Well, if it is an intelligence or better analysis, then what could it be? Having worked with some of the best and some of the worst traders in the business and having helped some of the worst become some of the best, I can state without a doubt that there is big reason why the best trader constantly outperform everyone else. If I had to distill all of the reason down to one, I will simply say that the best trader think differently from the rest. I know that doesn't sound very profound, but it does have profound implications if you consider what it means to think differently. To one degree or another, all of us think differently from everyone else. We may not always be mindful of this fact. It seems natural to assume that other persons share our perception and interpretation of event. In fact, this assumption continues to seem valid until we find ourselves in a basic fundamental disagreement with someone about something we both experience. I know that doesn't sound very profound, but having worked with some of the best and some of the worst traders in business and having helped some of the worst become some of the best, I can state without a doubt that there is a reason why the best trader constantly outperform everyone else. If I had to distill all of the reason down to one, I will simply say that the best trader think different from the rest. माइन्डसेटको मात्र कुरा आर्छ भने हायर छ्या च्यापिदिन्छु यो बुक मलाई मन पर्न भने साँच्चै भनेको यो पैसा बनाउने बुकहरू सबैको एउटै कुरा हुन्छ कि होइन केही हुन्न कि यो वासरी हेर्दैन कि माइन्डसेटको मात्र भनेर कुरा आर्छन् कि साँच्चै भनेको यो मैले पढेको सबभन्दा वर्स्ट बुक मध्ये एउटा रिड पिपल लाइक अ बुक भन्ने जुन छ नि त्यो साइकोलोजीवाला बुक त्यो हो त्यसपछि यो हुन्छ जस्तो लाग्यो होइन बुक पढेर हल्ले केही न केही त सिकिन्छ दिन्छु तर त्यो रिड पिपल लाइक अ बुक भन्ने त्यसको रिभ्यू नि यति राम्रो छ त्यसमा केही छँदै छैन कि साँच्चीकैमा उ गर्ने कुरा नै छैन कि त्यही नि रिभ्यू यस्तो राम्रो छ कि सबै त्यो एमेचोरहरू हो मैले मार्क मेन्सनको रिभ्यू हेर्थेँ मार्क मेन्सनले त्यसलाई 2/10 देखायो कि त्यही भएर मलाई त्यसको बुक पनि राम्रो लाउँछ कि भने मार्क मेन्सन त्यसको र मेरो थिङ्किङ चाहिँ कति धेरै कुरा मलाई एउटा लाउँछ कि साँच्ची भनेको कि त्यसको भित्र के छँदै छैन कि केही पनि छैन कि एकदमै डल कुराहरू एकदम सुपरफिसियल कुराहरू छ एकदमै एमेचोरहरूलाई राम्रो लाउँछ त्यो चाहिँ एकदमै बल्ल पढ्न सुरु गरेकोहरूलाई मैले चाहिँ त्यो 48 लज अफ पावर अनि हाउ टु डेल कार्नेगीहरूको बुक पढेर पढेँ त्यही भएर नि होला तर राम्रो छैन कि त्यो बुक रिभ्यू एहा I use the kind of having worked with some of the best and some of the worst traders in business and having help. I know that doesn't sound very profound, but it does have profound implications if you consider what it means to think differently. To one degree or another, all of us think differently from everyone else. We may not always be mindful of this fact. It's natural to assume that other people share our perception and interpretations of event. In fact, this assumption continues to seem valid until we find ourselves in a basic fundamental disagreement with someone over something we both experience. Other than our physical features, the way we think is what makes us unique, probably even more unique than our physical features too. Let's get back to traders. What is different about the way the best traders think as opposed to how those who are still struggling think? While the market can be described as an arena of endless opportunity, they simultaneously confront the individual with some of the most sustained adverse psychological conditions you can expose yourself to. At some point, everyone who trades will learn something about the market that will indicate one opportunity exists. For learning how to identify an opportunity to buy or sell does not mean that you have learned to think like a trader. The defining characteristic that separates the consistent winner from everyone else is this: the winners have attained a mindset or unique set of attitudes that allow them to remain disciplined, focused, and above all confident in spite of the adverse condition. As a result, they are no longer susceptible to the common fears and trading errors that plague everyone else. Everyone who trades ends up learning something about the market. Very few people who trade ever learn the attitudes that are absolutely essential to becoming a constant winner. Just as people can learn to portray the proper technique for swinging a golf club or tennis racket, their consistency or lack of it will without a doubt come from their attitude. Traders who make it beyond the threshold of consistency usually experience a great deal of pain, both emotional and financial, before they acquire the kind of attitude that allows them to function effectively in the market environment. The rare exceptions are usually those who were born into successful trading families or who started the trading conditions under the guidance of someone who understood the true nature of trading and, just as important, knew how to teach it. Why are emotional pain and financial disaster common among traders? The simple answer is that most of us weren't fortunate enough to start out trading careers with the proper guidance. However, the reason to go much deeper than this. I have spent the last 17 years dissecting the psychological dynamics behind trading so that I could develop effective method for teaching the principle of success. What I have discovered is that trading is so full of paradoxes and contradictions in thinking that make it extremely difficult to learn how to be successful. In fact, if I had to choose one word that encapsulates the nature of trading, it will be paradox. According to the dictionary of paradox, something that seems to have contradictory qualities or that is contrary to common belief or what generally makes sense to people. Financial and emotional disaster are common among traders because many of positive attitudes and principles that would otherwise make perfect sense and work quite well in our daily lives have the opposite effect in the trading environment. They just don't work. Not knowing this, most traders started the careers with a fundamental lack of understanding of what it means to be a trader, that the skills that are involved and the depth to which those skills need to be developed. Here is a prime example of what I am talking about. Trading is inherently risky. To my knowledge, no trade has a guaranteed outcome. Therefore, the possibility of being wrong and losing money is always present. So, when you put on a trade, can you consider yourself a risk taker? Even though this may sound like a trick question, it is not. The logical answer to the question is unequivocally yes. If I engage in an activity that's inherently risky, then I must be a risk taker. This is a perfectly reasonable assumption for any trader to make. In fact, not only do virtually all traders make this assumption, most traders take pride in thinking of themselves as risk takers. The problem is that this assumption could not be further from the truth. Of course, any trader is taking a risk when you put on a trade, but that doesn't mean that you are correspondingly accepting that risk. In other words, all trades are risky because the outcomes are probable, not guaranteed. But do most traders really believe they are taking a risk when they put on a trade? Have they really accepted that the trade has a non-guaranteed probable outcome? Furthermore, have they fully accepted the possible consequence? The answer is unequivocally no. Most traders have absolutely no concept of what it means to be a risk taker in the way a successful trader thinks about risks. The best trader not only take the risk, they have also learned to accept and embrace that risk. There is a huge psychological gap between assuming you are a risk taker because you put on trades and fully accepting the risks inherent in each trade. When you fully accept the risks, it will have profound implications on the bottom line performance. The best trader can put on trade without the slightest bit of hesitation or conflict, and just as flee and without hesitation or conflict admit it is not working. They can get out of the trade even with a loss, and doing so doesn't resonate the slightest bit of emotional discomfort. In other words, the risks inherent in trading do not cause the best trader to lose the discipline, focus, or sense of confidence if you are unable to trade without the slightest bit of emotional discomfort, especially fear. Then you have not learned how to accept the risks inherent in trading. This is a big problem because to whatever degree you haven't accepted the risks, it is the same degree to which you will avoid the risks. Trying to avoid something that is unavoidable will have a disastrous effect on your ability to trade successfully. Learning to truly accept the risks in any endeavor can be difficult, but it is extremely difficult for traders, especially considering what's at stake. What are you generally most afraid of besides dying or public speaking? Certainly, losing money and being wrong both rank close to the top of the list. Admitting we are wrong and losing money to boot can be extremely painful and certainly something to avoid. Yet, as traders, we are confronted with these two possibilities virtually every moment we are in trade. Now, you might be saying to yourself, apart from the fact that it was so much, it's natural to not want to be wrong and lose something. Therefore, it's so appropriate for me to do whatever I can to avoid it. I agree with you, but it is also this natural tendency that makes trading, which looks like it should be easy, extremely difficult. Trading presents us with fundamental paradox. How do we remain disciplined, focused, and confident in the face of constant uncertainty? When you have learned how to think like a trader, that's exactly what you will be able to do. Learning how to redefine your trading activities in a way that allows you to completely accept the risks is the key to thinking like a successful trader. Learning to accept the risks is the trading skill, the most important skill you can learn. It is rare that developing traders focus any attention or expend any effort to learn it. Trading presents us fundamental paradox. How do we remain disciplined, focused, and confident in the face of constant uncertainty when you have learned how to think like a trader? When you learn the trading skill of risk acceptance, the market will not be able to generate information that you define or interpret as meaningful. If the information the market generates doesn't have the potential to cause you emotional pain, there is nothing to avoid. It is just information telling you what the possibilities are. This is called an objective perspective, one that is not skewed or distorted by what you are afraid is going to happen or not happen. I am sure there isn't one trader reading this book who hasn't gotten into trades too soon, before the market has actually generated a signal, or too late. Long after the market has generated a signal, what trader hasn't convinced himself not to take a loss and as a result had it turned into a bigger one, or got out of winning trades too soon, or found himself in winning trades but didn't take any profit at all and then let the trade turn into losers or move stop losses closer to its entry point, wanted to get stop out and have the market to go back in its direction. These are what a few of many eras traders purpose open themselves time and time again. market exchange generated signal or too late, too long after the market generated signal. These are not market generated errors. This is that errors do not come from the market. The market is neutral in the sense that it moves and generates information about itself. Movement and information provides each of us with the opportunity to do something. But that's all. The market don't have any power over the unique way in which each of us perceives interprets this information or control of the decision and action we take as a result. The error I already mentioned and many more are strictly the result of what I call faulty trading attitudes and perspective. Faulty attitudes that foster fear instead of trust and confidence. I don't think I can put the difference between consistent winners and everyone else more simply than this. The best traders aren't afraid. They aren't afraid because they have developed attitudes that give them the greatest degree of mental faculty to flow in and out of place based on what the market is telling them about the possibilities from its perspective. At the same time, the best traders have developed attitudes that prevent them from getting reckless. Everyone else is afraid to some degree or another. When they are not afraid, they have the tendency to become reckless and to create the kind of experience for themselves that will cause them to be afraid from that point on. 95% of the trading errors you are likely to make causing the money to just evaporate before your eyes will system from your attitudes about being wrong, losing money, missing out and having money on the table, what I call the four primary trading fears. पेज नम्बर 12सम्म पढ्यो अहिलेसम्म के कति लगेर छैन यो बुकमा 214 कति छ 201 सम्म रहेछ दिदी अझ 188 पेज बाँकी छ हेरौँ है के छ Now you may be saying to yourself, I don't know about this. I've always thought traders should have a healthy fear of the markets. Again, this is a perfectly logical and reasonable assumption, but when you come to trading, your fears will act against you in such a way that you will cause the very thing you are afraid of to actually happen. If you are afraid of being wrong, your fear will act upon your perception of market information in a way that will cause you to do some things that ends up making you wrong. When you are fearful, no other possibility exists. You can perceive other possibilities or act on them properly, even if you did manage to perceive them, because fear is immobilizing. Physically, it causes us to freeze or run. Mentally, it causes us to narrow our focus of attention to the object of our fear. This means that thoughts about other possibilities as well as other available information from the market get blocked. You won't think about all the rational things you've learned about the market until you are no longer afraid that and the event is over. Then you will think to yourself, I knew that, why I didn't think of it then, or why wouldn't I act on it then? It's extremely difficult to perceive that the source of these problems are on inappropriate attitudes. That's what makes fear so insidious. Many of the thinking patterns that adversely affect our trading are a function of the natural way in which we were brought up to think and see the world. These thinking patterns are so deeply ingrained that it rarely occurs to us that the source of our trading difficulties is internal, derived from our state of mind. Indeed, it seems much more natural to see the source of problem as external in the market because it feels like the market causing our pain, frustration, dissatisfaction. Obviously, there are abstract concepts and certainly not some things most traders are going to concern themselves with. Yet, understanding the relationship between belief, attitudes, and perception is as fundamental as to trading as learning how to serve is to tennis, or as learning how to swing a club is to golf. Put another way, understanding and controlling your perception of market information is important only to the extent that you want to achieve consistent result. Page number 13 मा अहिलेसम्म कति लुकेर छैन यसमा I say this because there is something else about trading that is as true as the statement I just made. You don't have to know anything about yourself or the market to put on a winning trade, just as you don't have to know the proper way to swing a tennis racket or golf club in order to hit a good shot from time to time. The first time I played golf, I hit several good shots throughout the game, even though I hadn't learned any particular technique, but my score was over 120 for 18 new holes. Obviously, to improve my overall score, I needed to learn technique. Of course, the same is true for trading. We need technique to achieve consistency. But what technique? This is truly one of the most perplexing aspects of learning how to trade effectively. If you aren't aware of or don't understand how our belief and attitudes affect our perception of market information, it will seem as if it is the market behavior that is causing the lack of consistency. As a result, it will stand to reason that the best way to avoid losses and become consistent will be to learn more about the market. This bit of logic is a trap that almost all traders fall into at some point, and it seems to make perfect sense. But this approach doesn't work. The market simply offers too many often conflicting variables to consider. Furthermore, there are no limit to the market behavior. It can do anything at any moment. As a matter of fact, because every person who trades in a market variable, it can be said that any single trader can cause virtually anything to happen. This means that no matter how much you learn about the market behavior, no matter how brilliant an analyst you become, you will never learn enough to anticipate every possible way that the market can make you wrong or cause you to lose money. So if you are afraid of being wrong or losing money, it means you will never learn enough to compensate for the negative effect these fears will have on your ability to be objective and your ability to act without hesitation. In other words, you won't be confident in the face of constant uncertainty. The hard cold reality of trading is that every trade has an uncertain outcome. Unless you learn to completely accept the possibility of an uncertain outcome, you will try either consciously or unconsciously to avoid any possibility you define as painful. In the process, you will subject yourself to any number of self-generated costly errors. Now, I'm not suggesting that we don't need some form of market analysis or methodology to define opportunities and allows us to recognize them. We certainly do. However, market analysis is not path to constant result. It will not solve the trading problems created by lack of confidence, lack of discipline, or improper focus. When you operate from the assumption that more or better analysis will create consistency, you will be driven to gather as many market variables as possible into a arsenal of trading tools. But what happens then? You are still disappointed and betrayed by the market time and again because of something you didn't see or give enough consideration to. It will feel like you can trust the market, but the reality is you can trust yourself. Confidence and fear are contradictory state of mind that both stems from our belief and attitudes. To be confident functioning in an environment where you can easily lose money more than you intend to risk requires absolute trust in yourself. However, you won't be able to achieve that trust until you have trained your mind to override your natural inclination to think in ways that are counterproductive to being a consistently successful trader. Learning how to analyze the market behavior is simply not the appropriate training. You have two choices. You can try to eliminate risks by learning about as many market variables as possible. I call this black hole of analysis because it is the path of ultimate frustration. Or you can learn how to redefine your trading activities in such a way that you can truly accept the risks and you are no longer afraid. When you have achieved a state of mind where you truly accept the risks, you won't have the potential to define and interpret market information in painful ways. When you eliminate the potential to define market information in painful ways, you also eliminate the tendency to rationalize, hesitate, jump the gun, hope that the market will give you money or hope that the market will save you from the inability to cut your losses. As long as you are susceptible to the kinds of error that are the result of rationalizing, so justifying, hesitating, hoping, and jumping the gun, you will not be able to trust yourself. If you can trust to yourself to be objective and to always act on basic interest, achieving constant result will be next to impossible. Trying to do something that looks so simply may well be the most exasperating thing you will ever attempt to do. The irony is that when you have the appropriate attitude, when you have acquired a trader mindset and can remain confident in the face of constant uncertainty, trading will be as easy and simple as you probably thought it was when you first started out. So what is the solution? You will need to learn how to adjust your attitude and belief about trading in such a way that you can trade without the slightest bit of fear, but at the same time keep a framework in the place that doesn't allow you to become reckless. That is exactly what this book is designed to teach you. As you move ahead, I will like you to keep something in mind. The successful trader that you want to become is the future projection of yourself that you have to grow into. Growth implies expansion, learning, and creating new way of expressing yourself. That is true even if you are already a successful trader and reading this book to become more successful. Many of the new ways in which you will learn to express yourself will be in direct conflict with ideas and beliefs you presently hold about the nature of trading. You may or may not already be aware of some of the belief. In any case, what you currently hold to be true about the nature of trading will argue to keep things just the way they are, in spite of a frustration and unsatisfying result. These internal arguments are natural. My challenge in this book is to help you resolve this argument as efficiently as possible. Your willingness to consider that other possibility that you may not be aware of or not may be given enough consideration to will obviously make the learning process faster and easier. पेज नम्बर 16 सम्म आइदिन्छु. अहिलेसम्म मैले सिकेको भने फन्डामेन्टल एनालाइसिस र टेक्निकल एनालाइसिसको डिफिनेसन मात्र हो कि मैले साँच्चै भनेको यो बुक अहिलेसम्म सिकेको भने यो मात्र हो कि अरू केही नि छैन. 184 पेज बाँकी छ. अब हेरौँ है. द लर एन्ड द डेन्जर अफ ट्रेडिङ. In January 1994, I was asked to speak at a trading conference in Chicago sponsored by Future magazine. At one of the luncheon, I happened to be sitting next to an editor for one of the major publishers of book about trading. We were having a lively conversation about why so few people become successful at trading, even people who are otherwise very accomplished. At one point, the editor asked me if a possible explanation for this phenomenon might be that people were getting into trading for the wrong reason, the attraction. I had to pause for a moment to think about this. I agree that many of the typical reasons people are motivated to trade the action, euphoria, desire to be a hero, the attention one can do to himself by winning a set pity that comes from losing, create problems that will ultimately detract from a trader performance and overall success. But the true underlying attraction to trading is far more fundamental and universal. Trading is an activity that offers the individual unlimited freedom of creative expression, a freedom of expression that has been denied most of us for most of our lives. Of course, the editor asked me what I meant by this. I explained that in the trading environment, we make almost all of the rules. This means that there are very few restrictions or boundaries on how we can choose to express ourselves. Of course, there are some formalities such as having to become a member of an exchange to be a floor trader or meeting the minimum financial requirement to open a brokerage account if you are an off-the-floor trader. But otherwise, once you are in a position to start trading, the possibilities that exist for how you go about doing it are virtually limitless. What the fault? What the fault? The I wanted to give you an example from a seminar I attended several years ago. Someone had calculated that if you combine bond futures, bond option, and cash bond market, there will be over 8 billion possible split combination. However, the timing concentration based on how you read the prevailing market condition and the various ways to trade become virtually limitless. The editor paused for a moment and asked, "But why would having access to such an unrestricted environment result in very question failure?" I answered, "Because unlimited possibilities coupled with the unlimited freedom to take advantage of the possibility present the individual with unique and specialized psychological challenge that very few people are properly equipped to deal with or have any awareness or of for that matter, and people can actually work on overcoming something if they don't even know is the problem. The freedom is great. All of us seem to naturally want to strive for it, even crave it, but that doesn't mean that we have the appropriate psychological resources to operate effectively in an environment that has few, if any, boundaries and where the potential to do enormous damage to ourselves exists. Almost everyone needs to make some mental adjustment regardless of their educational background, intelligence, or how successful they have been in other endeavors. The kind of adjustment I'm talking about have to do with creating an internal mental structure that provides the trader with the greatest degree of balance between the freedom to do anything and the potential that exists to experience both the financial and psychological damage that can be direct result of that freedom. Creating a mental structure can be difficult enough, especially if what you want to instill is in conflict with what you already believe. But for those of us who want to be traders, the difficulty of creating the appropriate structure is invariably compounded by the backlog of mental resistance that start developing at the very earliest stage of our lives. All of us are born into some sort of social environment or society, whether it's a family, city, state, or country, implies the existence of structure. Social structure consists of rules, restrictions, boundaries, and a set of beliefs that become a code of behavior that limits the ways in which individuals within that social structure cannot express themselves. Furthermore, most of the limitations of social structure were established before we are born. In other words, by the time any of us get here, most of the social structure governing our individual expression is in place and well entrenched. It is easy to see why a society need for structure and individual need for self-expression can conflict. Every person who wants to master the art of creating faces just such a fundamental conflict. I would like you to ask yourself what one characteristic or form of personal expression is common to every child born on this planet. Regardless of the location, culture, or social situation the child is born into. The answer is curiosity. Every child is curious. Every child is eager to learn. They can be described as little learning machine. Consider the nature of curiosity at its most fundamental level. It is a force. More specifically, it is an inner directed force, which means there is no necessity to motivate a child to learn something. Left on their own, children would naturally explore the surrounding. What is more, this inner directive force also seems to have its own agenda. In other words, even though all the children are curious, not all children are necessarily curious about the same things. There is something inside each of us that directs our awareness to do certain original types of experience to the exclusion of others. Even infants seem to know that they want and what they want and they don't want. When adults encounter this unique display of individuality expressed by an infant, they are usually surprised. They assume that infants have nothing inside of them that makes them uniquely who they are. How is will infant express their individuality then by what in their environment attract or repulse them? I call this inner directed guidance the force of natural attraction. Natural attraction are simply those things about which we feel a natural or passionate interest. Ours is a big and diverse world, and it offers a great deal to learn about and experience. But that doesn't mean each of us has a natural or passionate interest in learning about or experience all there is. There is some internal mechanism that makes us naturally selective. If you think about it, I'm sure you could list many things to do or be that you have absolutely no interest in. I know I could. You could also make another list of the things you are only marginally interested in. Finally, you could list everything you have a passionate interest in. Of course, the list gets smaller as the interest levels rise. Where does passion and interest come from? My personal view is that it comes from the deepest level of our being. At the level of our true identity, it comes from the part of us that exists beyond the characteristics and personality traits we acquire as a result of our social upbringing. The dangers, it is at the deepest level of our being that the for conflict exists. The social structure that we are born into may or may not be sensitive to this inner directed needs and interests. For example, you may have been born into a family of extremely competitive athletes but feel a passionate interest in classical music or art. You may even have a natural athletic ability but no real interest in participating in athletic events. Is there any potential for conflict here? It is in a typical family, most members will put a great deal of pressure on you to follow in the footsteps of your brother, sister, or parent. They do everything possible to teach you their ways and how to get the most out of your athletic ability. They discourage you from seriously pursuing any other interest. You go along with what they want because you don't want to be ostracized, but at the same time doing what they want you to do just doesn't feel right. Although everything you long and been taught argues in favor of becoming an athlete, the problem is it doesn't feel like who you are. The conflicts that result from what we are taught about who we are supposed to be and the feeling that resonates at the deepest level of our being is not at all common. I will say that many, if not most people, grow up in a family and cultural environment that gives little, if any, objective, non-judgmental support, the unique way in which we feel compelled to express ourselves. This lack of support is not simply an absence of encouragement, it can be as deep as outright denial of some particular way in which we want to express ourselves. For example, let's look at common situation. A toddler who for the first time in his life notices this thing, which we call a base on the coffee table, is curious, which means there is an inner force that compelling him to express this object. In a sense, it is as if this force creates a vacuum in his mind that has to be filled with the object of his interest. So he focuses on the way, has and with deliberate intent cross across the vast expanse of the living room floor to the coffee table. When he gets there, he reaches up to the edge of the table to pull himself to his feet. With one hand firmly on the table to maintain his balance, his other hand reaches out to touch this thing he has never experienced. Just at the moment he hears the scream from across the room, "No, don't touch that." Startled, the child falls back on his butt and begins to cry. Obviously, this is a very common occurrence and one that is completely unavoidable. Children have absolutely no concept of how they can injure themselves or how valuable something like a vase can be. Oh. In fact, learning what is safe and what isn't and the value of things are important lessons the child must learn. However, there are some extremely important psychological dynamics at work here and have a direct effect on our ability to create the kind of discipline and focus necessary to trade effectively later in life. What happens when we are denied the opportunity to express ourselves in the way we want to, or we are forced to express ourselves in a way that doesn't correspond with the natural selection process? The experience creates an offset. Being offset implies an imbalance, but what exactly is out of balance? For something to be out of balance, there has to be something that's in imbalance or in equal proportion in the first place. That something is the relative degree of correspondence that exists between our inner mental environment and the external environment where we experience our lives. In other words, our needs and desires are generated in our mental environment and they are fulfilled in the external environment. If these two environments are in correspondence with one another, we are instead of inner balance and we feel a sense of satisfaction or happiness. If this environment are not a correspondence, we experience dissatisfaction, anger, and frustration, or what is commonly referred to as emotional pain. Now, why would not getting that what we want or being denied the freedom to express ourselves in some particular way cause us to experience emotional pain. My personal theory is that needs and desire create mental vacuums. The universe in which we live has a natural tendency to not tolerate a vacuum and moves to fill it whenever one exists. The philosopher Spinoza observed centuries ago that nature abhors vacuum. Suck the air out of water and your tongue and leaves will stick to the mouth of the bottle because we have created an imbalance which now must be filled. What are the dynamics behind the expression? Necessity is the mother of all inventions. The recognition that needs creates a mental vacuum that the universe will fill with inspiring thoughts if your mind is receptive. The thoughts in turn can inspire movement and expression that result in the fulfillment of that need. In this respect, I think our mental environment works like the universe at last. Once we recognize a need or desire, we move to fill the vacuum with an experience in the exterior environment. If we are denied the opportunity to pursue the object of this need or desire, it literally feels as if we are not whole or that something is missing, but which puts us into a state of imbalance or emotional pain. Your mind also abhors a vacuum once one has been created. Take a toy away from child who is not finished playing with it, regardless of how good your reason may be for doing so, and the universe response will be emotional pain. By the time we are 18 years old, we have been on Earth approximately 6,570 days on average. How many times per day does the typical child hear statement like, "No, no, you can do that. You can do it that way. You have to do it this way. Now, not now. Let me think about it. I will let you know. It can be done. What makes you think you can do it? You have to do it. You have no choice." There are just a few of relatively nice ways in which all of us are denied individual expression as we grow up. Even if we only heard such statement once or twice a day, that still adds up to several thousand denials by the time we reach adulthood. I call this kind of experience denied impulse to learn impulses that are based on inner need, originating from the deeper part of our identity from the natural selection process. What happens to all of these impulses that have been denied and left unfulfilled? Do they just go away? They can if they are reconciled in some way. If we do something or someone else does something to put our mental environment back into balance, what can put our mental environment back into balance? There are no more technique. The most natural one, especially for a child, is simply to cry. Crying is a natural mechanism, natural way of reconciling this denied unfulfilled impulse. Scientific researchers have found tears to be composed of negatively charged ion. If allowed to take its natural course, crying will expel the negatively charged energy in our mind and bring us back the state of balance even though the original impulse was never fulfilled. The problem is that one of the time events are not allowed to take the natural course and the denied impulse are never reconciled, at least not while we are still children. There are many reasons why adults don't like it when their children, especially boys, cry and do everything they can to discourage this behavior. There are just as many reasons why adults will not bother to explain to children why they are being forced to do something they don't want to do. Even if adults do try, there are no assurance that they will be effective enough to reconcile the imbalance. What happens if these impulses aren't reconciled? They accumulate and usually end up manifesting themselves in any number of addictive and compulsive behavior patterns. A very loose rule of thumb is whatever we believe we are deprived of as children can easily become addiction in adulthood. For example, many people are addicted to attention. I am referring to people who will do most anything to draw attention to themselves. The most common reason for this is that they believe they either didn't get enough attention when they were young or didn't get it when it was important to them. In any case, the deprivation becomes unresolved. Emotional energy that compels them to behave in ways that will satisfy their addiction. What's important for us to understand about these reconciled denied impulses that exist in all of us is how they affect our ability to stay focused and take a disciplined, constant approach to our trading. The safeguards. To operate effectively in the trading environment, we need rules and boundaries to guide our behavior. It is a simple fact for trading that the potential exists to do enormous damage to ourselves. Damage that can be way out of proportion to what we may think is possible. There are many kinds of trade in which the risk of loss is unlimited. To prevent the possibility of exposing ourselves to damage, we need to create an internal structure in the form of specialized mental discipline and perspective that guards our behavior so that we always act in our own best interest. This structure has to exist within each of us because unlike society, the market does not provide it. The market provides structure in the form of a behavior pattern that indicate when an opportunity to buy or sell exists. But that's where the structure ends with a simple indication. Otherwise, from each individual perspective, there are no formalized rules to guide your behavior. There aren't even any beginning, middle, or ending as there are in virtually every other activity we participate in. There is an extremely important distinction with profound psychological implication. The market is like a stream that is in constant motion. It doesn't start, stop, or wait. Even when the market are closed, prices are still in motion. There is no rule that the opening price on any day must be the same as the closing price on the day before. Nothing we do in society property prepares us to function effectively in such a boundaryless environment. Even gambling games have built-in structure that make them much different from trading and a lot less dangerous. For example, if we decide to play blackjack, the first thing we have to do is decide how much we are going to take our risk. This is choice we are forced to make by the rules of the game. If you don't make the choice, we don't get to play. In trading, no one actively is going to force you to decide in advance what your risk is. In fact, what we have limitless environment. When what we have is a limitless environment where virtually anything can happen at any moment, and only the constant winners define the risks in advance of putting on or trade. For everyone, each define the risk in advance will force you to confront the reality that each trade has probable outcome, meaning that it will be a loser. Consistent loser to aim something to ever assume the reality that no matter how good a trade looks, it will lose without the presence of external structure focus. That if you are to think otherwise, it is substantial to any number of justification, rationalization, and the kind of distorted logic that will allow him to get into trade believing that it can lose, which makes determine the risk in advance irrelevant. Determine the risk in advance. We're going to determine the risk in advance. एउटा कुरा सिकेँ दिदी मैले अल ग्याम्बलिङ गेम्स हेभ स्पेसिफाइड के अरे पेज नम्बर 26मा आएर चाहिँ के भन्यो भने ट्रेड गर्नुभन्दा पहिला आफूले कति पैसा त्यो ट्रेड राम्रो गएन भने कति पैसा हारिन्छ भनेर चाहिँ आफूले थाहा हुनुपर्छ अन्त भन्यो पेज नम्बर 26मा आएर कुनै पनि ट्रेड गर्नुभन्दा पहिला ट्रेडिङ गर्नुभन्दा पहिला यदि यो ट्रेड राम्रोसँग गएन भने मैले कति पैसा हार्छु भनेर चाहिँ थाहा हुनुपर्छ अरे क्या आफूलाई खै के भने दिदीहरूले बुझिन छोडिदियो अब अल gambling games have specified beginning, middle, and ending based on the sequence of events that determine the outcome of the game. Once you decide you are going to participate, you can change your mind. You are in for the duration. That's not true for trading. In trading, prices are in constant motion. Nothing begins until you decide it should. It lasts as long as you want and doesn't end until you want it to be over. Regardless of what you may have planned or wanted to do, and number of strategy factor can come into play, causing you to become distracted, causing your mind become scared or overconfident. In other words, causing you to behave in ways that are erratic and unintended. Because gambling games have a formal ending, they force the participant to be an active loser. If you are on a losing streak, you can keep on losing without making a conscious decision to do so. The end of each game calls the beginning of a new game, and you have to actively subject more of your asset to further risk by reaching into your wallet or pushing some chips to center of the table. Trading has no formal ending. The market will not take you out of the trade unless you have the appropriate mental structure to enter trading in a manner that is always in your best interest. You can become a passive loser. This means that once you are in a losing trade, you do not have to do anything to keep you losing. You don't even have to watch. You just know this is the market will take everything you want and more. One of the many contradictions of trading is that it offers a gift and a cost at the same time. The gift is perhaps for the first time in our lives we are in complete control of everything we do. The cost that there are no external rules or boundaries to guide our Structure of behavior, the only characteristic of the trading environment require that react with some degree of resistance and self-control. At least if you want to create some at least we want to create some major constant success structure. We need to so we need to kind of behavior as to originate our mind as a conscious act of free will. This were the main from beginning. All rules to create rules. I have not yet 100% trading would in the race the motion of creating a set of rules. The reason is always quite the contrary. It is very subtle. We agree on the one hand that make that rules make sense. What we really have no intention of doing. Do whatever is being searched. The resistance can be interest and at logical source. Most of the stories that our mind has given to us a result of our social upbringing and based on choice made by the other people. In other words, it was instilled in our mind what did not originate in our minds. This is a very important distinction in the process of instilling structure. Many of our natural impulse to move, express, and learn about the nature of existence through our own direct experience were denied. Many of these denied impulses were never reconciled and still exist inside of us as frustration, anger, disappointment, guilt, or even hatred. The accumulation of this negative feeling acts as a force inside our mental environment, causing us to resist anything that denies us the freedom to do and be whatever we want when we want. In other words, the very reason we are attracted to trading in the first place, the unlimited freedom of creative expression, is the same reason we feel our natural resistance to creating the kind of rules and boundaries that can appropriately guide our behavior. It's as if we have found a utopia in which there is a complete freedom, and then someone taps on the shoulder and say you have to create rules, and not only that, you also have the discipline to abide by them. The need for rules make perfect sense, but it can be difficult to generate the motivation to create those rules when we have been trying to break free of them most of our lives. It is take a great deal of pain and suffering to break down the source of our resistance to establishing and abiding by the trading regime that will organize, constantly reflect providing money management guidelines. Now, I am not implying that you have to reconcile all of your past frustration and disappointment to become a successful trader, because that's not the case, and you certainly don't want to suffer. I have worked with many traders who have achieved their objective of consistency and haven't done anything to reconcile the fact of a denied impulse. However, I am implying that you can take for granted how much effort and focus you may have to put into building the kind of mental structure that compensate for the negative effort behind denied impulse can have on your ability to establish the skill that will assure you success as a trader. Failure to take responsibility. Trading can be characterized as pure on income but personal choice with an immediate outcome. Remember, nothing happens when you decide to study class as long as and it doesn't end until we decide to stop. All of the beginning, middles, and ending are the result of our interpretation of the information available and how we choose to act on our interpretation. Now, we may want the freedom to make choice, but that doesn't mean we are ready and willing to accept the responsibility for the outcome. Traders who are not ready to accept the responsibility for the outcomes of their interpretation and action will find themselves in a dilemma. How does one partially deny activities that allow complete freedom of choice and at the same time ever taking responsibility if the outcome of one's choice are unexpected and not one's liking? The hard reality of trading is that if you want to create consistency, you have to start from the premise that no matter what the outcome, you are completely responsible. This is a level of responsibility few people have expired before they decide to become traders. The way to avoid responsibility to add up a trading style that is all to all intents and purposes random. I define random trading as poorly planned trades or trades that are not planned at all. It is an organized approach that takes into consideration an unlimited set of market variables which do not allow you to find out what works on custom basis and what does not. Randomness is only structured freedom without a responsibility. When we trade without well-defined plans and with an unlimited set of variables, it's easy to become the trades that turn out to be liking because there was some method present. At the same time, it's very easy to ever taking responsibility for the trades that did not turn out the way we wanted because there's always some variable we did not know about and therefore could not take into consideration before it. If the market behavior were truly random, then it will be difficult, if not impossible, to create consistency. If it's impossible to be consistent, we really don't have to take responsibility. The problem with this logic is that our direct experience of the market tells us something different. The same behavior pattern presents themselves over and over again, even though the outcome of each Individual patterns random. The outcome of a series of patterns constitutes statistically reliable. This is a paradox, but one that is easily resolved with a disciplined, organized, and constant approach. I have worked with countless traders who will spend hours doing market analysis and planning trades for the next day. Then instead of putting on the trade they plan, they did something is the trades they did put on were usually ideas from friends or tips from brokers. I probably don't have to tell you that traders they originally planned. Tell you that the trades they originally planned but did not act on were usually the big winners of the trade. So that's how we become subject to on stocks or random trading. We want to have a responsibility. When we act on our own ideas, we put our creative abilities on our line and we get instructed on how well our ideas work. It's very difficult to rationalize away any unsuccessful result. Normally, less to create rules. In favor of trading and random approach. Addiction to random or reward. Several studies have been done on psychic effect of random reward on monkey. For example, if it is a motive to do tax and reward it every time the tax on a monkey, it learns to accept to speech automatically. If you stop rewarding it for doing the tax within a very short period of time, the monkey will simply stop doing the tax, even wasting energy doing something that is as now long it won't be rewarded for. However, the monkey response to being cut off from the reward is very different. If we start out on purely random schedule instead of constant one, when you stop offering the reward, there's no way the monkey can know that it will never be rewarded again for doing the task. Time it reward in the past, the reward came as a surprise as a result from the monkey perspective. No reason to quit doing the task. The monkey keeps on doing the task even without being rewarded for doing it. Some will continue indefinitely. So while we are subject to become addicted to random reward, if I had to guess, I would say that it probably has something to do with the euphoria, including chemicals that are present when we experience an unexpected pleasant surprise. If a reward is random, we never know for sure if and when we might receive it. So expending energy and resources in the hope of experiencing the wonderful feeling of surprise again isn't difficult. In fact, for many people, it can be very addicting. On the other hand, when we expect a particular outcome and it doesn't come about, we're disappointed and feel bad. If we do it again, we get the same disappointing outcome. It isn't likely that we'll keep doing something will cause us emotional pain. And addiction is the idea of losing the state of choicelessness to whatever degree the addiction dominates our state of mind to that the same degree of focus and effort will be geared to fulfilling the opposite of the addiction. Or the possibility that it is now giving moment to fulfill other needs like the need to cross ourselves not to be subject to many offensive critics are rather ignore dismiss. We feel powerless to act in any other way than to satisfy the addiction. The addiction to random reward is particularly troublesome for traders because it is another source of resistance to creating the kind of mental structure that produces consistency. you are like a monkey. Are you a monkey, motherfucker? Addiction to random reward. Several studies have been done on the psychological effect of random reward on a monkey. For example, if it is a monkey to do a task and constantly reward it every time the task is done, the monkey quickly learns to set up especially automate the effort. Sorry. External versus internal control problem. Our upbringing has programmed us to function in a social environment, which means we require a certain thing, new strategy for fulfilling our needs, wants, and desires that are geared towards social interaction. Not only have we learned to depend on each other to fulfill the needs, wants, and desire we cannot fulfill completely on our own, but in process we acquire many social-based controlling and manipulating technique for asking that other people behave in a manner that is consistent with what we want. Market may seem like a social endeavor because there are so many people involved, but they are not. If in today's modern society we have learned to depend on each other to business needs, then the market environment, even though it's in the midst of modern society, can be characterized as psychological wilderness, where it's truly every man or woman for himself or herself. Not only can we not depend on the market to do anything for us, but it is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to manipulate or control anything that the market does. Now, if we become effective at fulfilling our need, wants, and desire by learning how to control and manipulate our environment, we suddenly find ourselves as trader in our environment that doesn't know, care, or respond to anything that is important to us. What does that give us? You are right. If you set up an Uber wheel click with our pedal. One of the principal reasons so many successful people have failed miserably at trading is that their success is partly attributable to their superior ability to manipulate and control the social environment to respond what they want. To some degree, all of us have learned or develop technique to make the external environment conform to our mental environment. The problem is that none of this technique work with the market. The market doesn't respond to control and manipulation unless we have the last trader. However, we can control perception interpretation of market information as well as our own behavior. Instead of controlling others around us, so they conform to our idea of the way things will be. We are not to control ourselves, then we can perceive information from the most objective perspective possible and structure our mental environment so that we always live in a manner that is in our own best interest. Taking responsibility. Although the words taking responsibility sounds simple, the concept is either easy to grasp nor easy to put into practice in trading. We have all heard the words and have gone through the need to take responsibility so many times in our life that it is easy to take for granted that we know exactly what the phrase means. In our trading and learning, the appropriate principle of success are inextricably connected. We have to understand with every fiber of a being the ways in which you are and are not responsible for success as a trader. Only then you can take the characteristics that will allow you to join the select group of traders who are constantly successful in the market. At the end of chapter 1, I used the idea of stepping into a future position of yourself. In other words, the constantly successful trader that you want to become does not exist yet. You must create a new version of yourself just as a sculptor creates a likeness of model. Oh no. Shaping your mental environment. The tools you will use to create this new version of yourself are your willingness and desire to learn, fueled by your passion to be successful. If the willingness and desire to learn are primary tools, then what is medium? An artist creating a sculpture can choose to work in a number of medium, clay, marble, or metal, for example. But if you want to create a new version of your personality that expresses you as constantly a successful creator, you have only your belief and attitude. The medium for an artistic endeavor will be your mental environment, where with your desire to learn, you can structure and install the belief and attitude that are necessary to achieve your ultimate goal. And assuming your ultimate goal is consistency, if you are like most traders, you don't realize the fullest potential of the opportunities available to you. To realize more and more of that potential, to make it more and more of a reality of in your life, your primary goal has to be to learn how to think like a consistently successful trader. Remember, the best traders think in a number of unique ways. They have acquired a micro structure that allows them to trade without fear and at the same time keeps them from becoming reckless and committing fear-based errors. This mindset has a number of components, but the bottom line is the successful traders have also eliminated the effect of fear and recklessness from their trading. These two fundamental characteristics allow them to achieve consistent results. When you acquire this mindset, you too will be able to trade without fear. You will no longer be susceptible to the multitude of fear-based errors that come from rationalizing, subconsciously distorting information, hesitating, jumping the gun, or hoping. Once the fear is gone, there just won't be a reason to make these errors, and as a result, they will virtually disappear from your trading. However, eliminating fear is only half the equation. The other half is the need to develop restraint. Excellent traders have found that it is to have internal discipline or a mental mechanism to counteract the negative effect of euphoria, the opportunities that come from of winning trades. For trader, winning is estimating if you haven't learned how to monitor and control yourself. If we start from the premise that to create consistent trader must focus the effort in developing trader mindset, then it is easy to see why so many traders don't succeed. Instead of learning to think like traders, they think about how they can make more money by learning about the market. It's almost impossible not to fall into this trap. There are no more psychological factors that make it very easy to assume that it is what you don't know about the market that causes you loss and lack of consistent result. However, that's not the case. Constantly you seek is in the mind and not in the market. It's attitude and belief about being wrong, losing money, and tendency to become reckless when you're feeling good that cause most person not taking the market knowledge. For example, if you could choose one of the following two trades to manage your money, which one will you pick? The first trade is simple, possible, even mediocre trading in technique, but possesses a mindset that is not subconsciously distorting market information, it's rational as opening or jumping the gun. The second trade is a phenomenal analysis, but is still operating out of a typical phase that makes necessary to all of the cycles and melody that the other trader is free of. The right choice will be obvious. The first trader is going to achieve far better result with your money. Attitude produces better overall result than analysis or technique. Of course, the ideal situation is to have both, but you really don't need both because if you have the right attitude, the right mindset, then everything is about trading will be relatively easy, even simple, and certainly a lot more fun. I know for some of you this may be difficult to believe or even distressing, especially if you have been studying for years to learn everything you can about the market. Interestingly, most traders are closer to the way they need to think when they first begin trading than at any other time in their career. Many people begin trading with a very unrealistic concept of the inherent danger involved. This is particularly true if their first trade is a winner. Then they go into second trade with a little or no fear. If the trade is a winner, they go into the next trade with even less concern for what will otherwise be the unacceptable possibilities of a loss. If subsequent win convinces that there is nothing to fear and that trading is the easiest possible way to make money. This lack of fear translates into carefree state of mind similar to the state of mind in many great athletes as a zone. If you ever had the occasion to experience the zone in some sport, then you know it's state of mind, you know there is absolutely no fear and react and react instantly. You don't what alternative or consequence or second situation you are in the middle of just doing it. Whether you do turns out to be exactly what needed to be done. Most of never reach this level of play because they never get past the fear of making a mistake. Actually, we reach the point of where there is absolutely no fear of the consequence of usually and quite spontaneously turning into the zone by the way a cycle the zone is the most condition you can will yourself into the way you can will yourself into a feat of endurance. It is a state of mind you find yourself in that is inherently creative. And usually if you start thinking about the action at a rational or conscious level, you pop right out of it. Even though you cannot force or will yourself into a zone, you can set up a kind of mental condition that almost conductive to experience the zone. By developing a positive winning attitude, I define a positive winning attitude as experiencing a positive result from your effort with an acceptance that whatever result you get are a perfect reflection of your level of development and what you need to learn to do better. That's why the great athletes have a winning attitude that allows them to easily move beyond the mistake and keep going. Others get bogged down in negative self-criticism, regret and self-pity. Not many people ever develop a positive winning attitude. The curious anomaly of trading is that if we start with a winning trade, we automatically express the kind of careful mindset that is a byproduct of a winning attitude. Without having developed the attitude itself, I know this may sound a bit confusing, but it has some profound implication. If a few winning trades can cause you to enter into the kind of carefree state of mind that is an essential component to your success, what is not founded on the appropriate attitudes, then what you have is a prescription for extreme misunderstanding about the nature of trading that inevitably results in both emotional and financial disaster. Putting on a few or more winning trades doesn't mean you have become a trader, but that's the way it feels because it taps into a statement that only the most accomplished people experience on a constant basis. The fact is, you don't need the slightest bit of skill to put on a winning trade, and if it is possible to put on a winning trade without the slightest bit of skill, it is certainly possible to put on another and another. I know of several people who started their trading careers with very substantial string of winning trades. When you are feeling confident encumbered by fears and worries, it isn't difficult to put on a string of winning trades because it is easy to get into a kind of natural rhythm where what you need to do seems obvious or self-evident. It is almost as if the market screams at you when to buy and when to sell, and you need a very little in the way of analytical sophistication. And of course, because you have no fear, you can execute the trades with no internal argument or conflict. The point I'm making is that winning is in an individual must be a function of attitude. When people are certainly aware of this, but at the same time, most people don't understand significant part attitude plays in the result. In most of other competitive activities, a participant must develop physical skills as well as mental skill from a strategy. If opponents are not even massive, the skill department, the one with super skill usually. But not always means when an underdog beats a superior opponent was the determining factor when two opponents are evenly matched was the factor that tips the balance one way or the other in both cases the attitude. What makes trading so fascinating and at the same time difficult to learn is that you really don't need a lot of skill, you just need a genuine winning attitude. Experience fewer or more winning trades can make you feel like a winner, and that feeling is what sustains the winning trade. This is why it is possible for a novice trader to put on a string of winning trades when many of the industry based market analysts will give the right term for a string of winning trades. The analysts have the skill but they don't have the winning attitude. They are playing out fear. The novice trader experiences the feeling of a winning attitude because he's not afraid, but that doesn't mean he has a winning attitude. It only means he has an experience and pain from trading activity to making him afraid. Reacting to loss. Eventually, our novice trader will experience a loss and being wrong regardless of how positive he is feeling. Losing and being wrong are inevitable realities of trading. The most positive attitude imaginable coupled with the best analytical skills can prevent a trader from eventually experiencing a losing trade. The market is just too erratic and there are too many variables to consider for any trader to be right every time. What happens when the novice trader finally does lose? What effect will happen on the carefree state of mind? The answer will depend on his expectation going into the trade and how he interprets the experience. And how he interprets the experience is the function of his belief and attitude. What if he is operating out of belief that there is no possible way to avoid a loss because losing is a natural consequence of trading? No different from, let's say, a restaurant or incurring the expense of having to buy food. For the most of us that he has completely accepted the risk, meaning that he has considered and accounted for all what will have otherwise be the unacceptable possibilities in the market behavior, both financially and emotionally. With this belief and experience, it unlike the dual experience of deterioration of attitude and will simply go on to the next trade by the way, this is an example of idealist state of trading belief and attitudes. Now suppose that he hasn't completely accepted the risks. What if his expectation didn't take into account any market behavior other than what he wanted? From this mental perspective, if the market doesn't do what he wants, he is going to feel pain, emotional pain. Expectation, our mental representation of how some future movement in the environment is going to look, sound, feel, smell, or taste. Depending upon how much energy is behind the expectation, it can hurt a lot when it isn't fulfilled. Of the two different perspectives I just described, which one is likely to be held by a novice trader? The latter, of course, only the very best traders have acquired the perspective described in the first scenario. And as I indicated in chapter 1, only these very best traders grew up in a successful trading families or had super traders for mentors. Very appropriate to our risks and loss for registering them from the beginning. Virtually everyone of them had the common experience of losing one or more fortune before they realize how they need to think in order to be constantly successful. It's a fundamental shift in attitude that account for the success, not some brilliant realization about the market as most people erroneously assume. The erroneous assumption is prevalent among traders simply because very few of them really understand at the deepest level just how critical a component attitude is in determining one's success. We can safely assume that after loss, our novice trader will be in a state of emotional pain. As a result, this trading will take on a whole new quality. He will definitely lose that carefree state of mind, but more importantly, he will feel that the market did this to him. The market caused him to feel the pain he is experiencing. The market took away his winning feeling by subjecting him to a loss. Notice how our trader is buying in the market for losing or what he didn't get. Notice how natural it is to feel the way he does. Think about how many times in our life, especially as children, we're doing something we really enjoy, like playing with a toy or with our friends, and someone with more power and authority force us to stop what we're doing and something we don't want to do. All of us have lost things and have things taken away from us being doing things we wanted or believe we deserve. Being creative for continuing activity, we're in the middle of what being blocked from pursuing an idea we're passionate about. The point is that in many of the situations, we did not need to take personal responsibility for what happened to us, for us, or for the pain we experienced because we were powerless to do anything about it. We did not choose to be forced out of a state of joy and happiness into a state of emotional pain. The decision was out of hands against our will and usually quite abrupt. Even though we may have been told we were responsible for what was happening to us, we may not have been believed it or understood what it meant. What's tangible and what we can most easily relate to is that we're having fun and someone or something took us out of that fun and into pain. It wasn't our choice, the cause our pain came to us from the outside, therefore whatever force acted upon us in that moment was to blame. We learned not only that feeling good can instantly be replaced with a feeling bad through no fault of our own, we also learned about betrayal. We felt betrayed because many of these things were completely unexpected or unanticipated, meaning we were unprepared for how some people in our lives have the potential to behave. If the behavior causes us to slip into a state of emotional pain, then we quite naturally will have helped it. As a side note, I feel it is important to say that many of our past emotionally painful experiences were the result of well-meaning parents, teachers, and friends, many of whom we were only doing what they believed at the time, and one was best for us. To make example is a child playing with a toy that is inherently dangerous. Take the toy away, and the child will try to express the emotional pain he is experiencing. And if you are dealing with a very immature child, in all likelihood, he will not listen to anything reasonable advice about why he cannot play with the toy. But at the same time, many people are born to immature and unreasonable parents are encountering emotionally disturbed teachers. Their personal teachers coach and play with subconsciously intentionally inflict the personal problems on anyone they perceive as having less power. What's even worse is many of the people who have a tendency toward victimism others are also clever enough to do it in a way that makes the victim believe they caused their own pain. In any case, whether our painful experience as the result of an act of love or intentionally inflicted is something each of us will have to determine for ourselves. The bottom line is that as adults, when we get in trading mode, we don't realize how natural it is to accelerate the instantaneous shift from joy to pain that we experience so often as children, with the same instantaneous shift from joy to pain that occurs when we trade. The implications are that if we hadn't learned to accept the inherent risks of trading and don't know how to guard against making this natural connection between our past and the present, we end up blaming the market for a result instead of taking responsibility for them. Even though most people who trade consider themselves responsible, and only the very best traders have reached the point where they can and do accept complete responsibility for the outcome of any particular trade. Everyone is to one degree or another assume they are taking responsibility that they want the market to do it for them. They want the market to fulfill its own dreams. So remember this: what our markets are not is that we can expect other people to behave in reasonable and responsible ways, what they don't have, and so as a result, society makes remedies about to rectify the imbalance and make us whole again. The market, on the other hand, has no responsibility to give us anything or do anything that could benefit us. This may not be the way market are advertised and certainly not the impression they want to project, but the reality is every trader who participates in the market does so for his own benefit. The only way one trader can benefit is if some trader loses, whether loss in exit or as in future trade or loss opportunity or as in stock trade. When you put on a trade, it is an anticipation of making money. Every other traders in the world who puts on a trade does so for the same reason. When we look at relationship with the market from this perspective, we will say that your purpose is to extract money from the market, but by the same token, the market should purpose to extract money or opportunity from you. If the market is a group of people interacting to extract money from one another, then what is the market responsibility to the individual trader? It has no responsibility or the right to follow the rules it has established to facilitate this activity. The point is that if you ever found yourself blaming the market for failing betrayal, then you have not even enough constitution to the implication of what means to play a zero-sum game. And if you blame means you have not accepted the reality that the market owes you nothing regardless of what you think or how much you put into trading.